Okay, now it says live.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hello. Test, test, test. Testosterone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, that's good. I can see that both Britain and Ori are here, which is good. Let's see who else
Oh,
shows up.
hi. Hello, lurkers. Hi, Britain. Britain left that, I think, the other day.
Yeah.
Should be fun.
No, it should be fun.
It should be fun. Rafe's got his beer. I've got my doc. You gotta open it first.
Yeah, I gotta open it in a second.
Okay.
Let's actually get started here.
Boom.
Well, cheers, everybody, and welcome to the thing that we always do at the end of the month. And today, because I'm scared, I got myself reinforcements, and I'm really happy to have you here. How are you doing tonight?
Well, it's afternoon for me, but I'm doing okay. Doing better. I've been sick, but I'm feeling better. So doing great. Here at 2 p.m. I guess it's 9 where you are.
It is 9 where I am, yes. And
Nice.
I have a very good friend came by about 3 hours ago, which and we had to try some very special beers that are sort of like season dependent, and that's what we did.
Nice.
Hey, Biggest, how you doing tonight?
Biggest bad. Yo.
Over in the future in Ireland. All right, I guess we'll just do the usual thing. And tonight, because most people in the chat, I don't know if anyone actually knows you. Let's start with introducing yourself. Who are you? Why are you here? And what do you do besides really liking guinea pigs?
Well, I'm Amanda from my channel, Strange Mentality Paper. I'm a teacher, and if you can't tell by my accent, I'm American. I live in Texas, and I mostly make content about books, but I'm primarily a screenwriter. I've worked in writers' rooms, meaning out like in the sweatshop that is Hollywood remotely. But yeah, Rafe and I are friends, unlike me and a lot of people on BookTube. I'm not the most popular one, but I'm here now.
Yeah, well, you're technically a much larger channel than mine, because you got lucky and struck the Indian hype for Ken Follett, apparently.
I think I did. I don't know. I think they're scammers and bots, but it still looks nice.
Do you get like a lot of these comments that tell you that you need to do some SEO, and they could tell you and teach you how to make your channel even bigger? Do you get those kind of comments? Because I get those.
No, not really.
Lucky you, then.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I do. Yeah. Now that I think about it, here, click this link, and you can improve your channel. Yeah.
Yeah. If I wanted to improve my channel, I would do things.
Yeah. I'd put more effort into it. It's one of the reasons I don't have a Discord or a Patreon, because I would have to put more effort into that editing side, which I don't want to do.
The freezing cold in Ireland. I don't even want to know how cold it is in Dublin right now, but I assume, like, here I think we've gone down back to around 0, like when I was out earlier.
That's colder than it is here. I think we're in, let me see, let me check my phone. We're probably in the 70s, which Celsius, I don't know, dude. So it's loading. 74. So that's...
Hey, Jane, how you doing?
20-something in Celsius.
20-something, that's warm. That's t-shirt weather.
Yep. Fahrenheit to Celsius. So 74. 23.
Yeah, that's like that's summer weather. Like years ago, I was in Iceland for like a trip, and it was like 20, 25, somewhere between 20 and 25. So like when you just like said 70 Fahrenheit,
well,
and everyone was complaining that it was way too hot and everything.
That's a joke. No, here it gets up to Fahrenheit. Like when we're once we get to July, it's 105 every day.
Oof.
There's
Yeah.
nowhere like Dallas as far as heat goes. Heat and humidity. I always say we have the heat of Phoenix with humidity of Orlando, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it gets the point across.
That sounds really bad indeed.
We also everywhere has air conditioning, though. I know it's not like that in Europe.
No, no, we don't have air conditioning in Germany. We don't have that. We have windows, and that's about it.
Yeah. No, you open the windows here, it's just going to get hotter.
Yeah, true. No, no, right now that's not that's rarely how it works. I'm lucky because I live on a hilltop, so I can open windows on both sides of the flat, and there's always a bit of a breeze because it's literally on a hilltop, and there's always a little wind that kind of helps cooling stuff down. But though climate change may be a problem, it does not yet lead to heat stroke in February in Germany. So let's go back and talk a bit about you as a screenwriter, because you have a degree in creative writing, right?
I do, yeah. My undergrad is in creative writing.
And then you went to Hollywood to start to working in screenwriting, or how did that happen?
Other way around.
Oh wait,
So
you started writing you started doing screenwriting, and then you decided to actually get a
yeah.
degree.
Well, I started screenwriting in high school,
Okay.
and I worked remotely for showrunner for a little bit. And while I was kind of at school, but then I got into a car wreck where I got my spinal injury. And then I stopped going to school for a little bit because I had lost some mobility, still screen wrote for a long time. And then finally went back in 2018 and finished my creative writing degree and got a real job because I lost my insurance and kind of fell off the screenwriting wagon for a while and focused on prose in 2019. And that's what I've been doing since then. I still screenwrite. I still primarily consider myself a screenwriter. But honestly, I got a little bored with it. So I decided to try something new, and I haven't really looked back. But I still screenwrite. I still talk to my screenwriter friends. I still enter contests every now and then. But yeah, I'm not like a working screenwriter like I was.
Mm-hmm. But how do you actually start working in the screenwriting industry though? Because it's like I'm over here in Germany. We don't have we do have film industry, but we don't talk about it because it's really bad. And like how do you start? How do you go about like becoming a screenwriter? How does it happen? Like what did you make? What did make you start? And how did you do? Go about
Well,
it?
I got in through the contest circuit. So
Hmm.
there are some really important contests like the Austin Film Festival,
Hmm.
the Page Awards, the Nichols Fellowship, which um, a lot of like really good films have come out of there. But I was a finalist in the Page Awards, and that got the attention of some agencies and some directors and showrunners and stuff. So
Hmm.
I totally went the contest route. I don't think that's the typical way to go. Normally it's networking and getting your foot in, but being out in Texas, I did not have that opportunity. So it was all just placing in contests.
Okay.
And then they
Uh,
approached me.
cool.
But I
What
never really like did the grind that a lot of people do. Um, just because of where I live.
Okay. But that's like the question, like, what didn't make you start writing screenwriting? You just like saw the contest and you're like, hey, this sounds cool. I want to do this, or is there like a
Um,
motivation behind that?
I've always loved movies, and that's kind of a hard question to answer because I've never really thought about it. I always loved writing, but I guess I could say it was when that movie Mean Girls came out, which is still one of my favorite movies. I was watching the like commentary, the
Hmm.
DVD commentary that like when they play the movie, they talk about what's going
Yeah.
on. And Tina Fey was in the background talking, and I think that was the first time. So that movie came out in 2004, so this was probably around 2004. I realized that, oh wait, someone has to write the movie. So that's what kind of got me into screenwriting, I think. Um,
Hmm.
But yeah, that's just what I gravitated towards, that and short stories mostly. A few years ago, I like never could see myself writing a novel just because long form was so intimidating. But then the pandemic hit and I had nothing else to do. So I was inspired at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I decided to write a novel and I did. And
Excellent. Yeah.
yeah, I've never really thought about that. But yeah, that's what I guess just liking movies so much.
Yeah, that's just like something I was curious about. Is like how do you end up in screenwriting? Because from like I think it's interesting from my perspective, where I would go like, well, I can write a short story because I read short stories relatively. I read short stories, I read
Screenplays
novels. I can do the same
screenplays are
thing.
a lot. I'm interrupting you, sorry, but
Yeah, no
screenplays
worries.
are much more similar to short stories than novels are.
Yeah, that
A
makes sense.
screenplay is essentially a short story.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's more like when most of us who start writing, well, not me because I don't write, like people start writing and they just write the same thing that they love, which
Yeah.
is a good way to start stuff. You enjoy it, you're like, I want to do the same thing. But people who love movies don't necessarily read screenplays and start figuring out how to write screenplays.
Yeah,
That's
no,
kind of
that's what I did. I read screenplays and that's how I just copied what I saw. Well, I didn't copy, but took influence. So yeah, that is what
that,
I did.
yeah, that makes sense because at the end of the day, it's like I have, obviously I have not studied, I don't have a degree in creative writing, but it's like at the end of the day, a lot of what you do is like read stuff, figure out what the people that wrote these things did and how you can use the same techniques. And you still need to read stuff. So I assume that for, writing screenplays, you'd better read some screenplays to figure out
Yeah.
what people do.
Yeah, and they're fun to read. Like thinking back on it, I was like I got back into reading during the pandemic. Like I didn't read at all, but looking back, I did. I read a ton. I just read a ton of screenplays, and
Yeah.
partially, I think the reason I didn't read so much is because I was an English major and I had so much assigned reading, and it was all really really bad that I just figured I didn't like reading books until I found good books, and all my students who say they hate reading, I'm like, well, no, let's go find something. And
Yeah.
it usually works.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, that makes sense. So I guess like the next question that I had is like, why did you move over to short stories into writing prose and now obviously writing novels as well? It's like, how does, actually starting a creative writing degree, how that did that impact like the way you write, the way you think about writing? Did that have like any impact, or did you go in there like, I already know how to do this shit?
Um, well, because it was in the English department and it was
Mm.
not the film department,
Yeah.
um, because I transferred, um, so my degree with my credits, it's different, I'm sure, where you are. We're all kind of wonky.
Hmm.
But I always knew I wanted to go the English route because I didn't want to do anything else in film. I just wanted to write. I didn't want to carry the cameras. I didn't want to go through all the
Hmm.
like survey of radio and television that they make you take in the beginning.
Hmm.
So I went in there um, like knowing I was gonna be kind of on the better side of the students, um, but
Because you already had experience writing and
I did.
not
I
not
had
getting published, but at least getting stuff used later on, right?
right, and so um, I went in there, and of course, I was a little bit older because of my spinal injury. But what I was most looking forward to is workshopping, and that's what you do when you get into your higher level creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And to be quite honest, I only went to college because my parents made me. And the
Yeah.
reason I majored in English, I was going to do like English or theater, was because there was too much math and anything else. And I have a learning disability in math, so I only do math on like a ninth grade level. So there's no way I was making it through calculus. I've never taken a calculus class in my life. Never taken trig. I've never taken those high level maths.
Mm.
I said maths. I've never taken those high level math courses. Um, and so I knew I wasn't going to make it through. So I chose a degree that I knew I could pass.
Yeah.
And what it was what transitioned me really over to prose, because I discovered what we call creative nonfiction.
Mm.
And I took the first, the intermediate creative nonfiction class, because I like the begin creative writing class I had taken at my old school before I transferred. Um, no, you're not right, biggest bad. It is not maths. I was speaking plurally. Those maths classes, you're not right. Say mathematics. Mathematics is interesting. So it's math. It is not mathematics are interesting. So you are wrong. But anyway, um, I discovered
You may have inadvertently triggered an ongoing dispute between
yeah,
Irish and English people.
Irish and English people. So, um, well, anyway, I discovered what's called creative nonfiction, which is like memoir and personal essay. And it was very serendipitous in like a very odd way how I discovered it, because I was trying to sign up for the advanced fiction class, but I had missed the deadline. And so they were like, well, they said like, they're like, well, we could do something. And I don't remember what they said. And then I was like, well, I don't really see the point. And so I just got mad. I was like, I worked customer service for a while too. And so I just did the whole like pissed off customer thing to them and hung up. And I ended up in the intermediate nonfiction class because I couldn't get into the advanced fiction class because it was full.
Yeah.
And so at first, when I first started creative nonfiction, I thought I was really bad. I didn't like it at all. And then when I got into the advanced fiction nonfiction class, I realized I was like, maybe I'm not as bad as this at this as I like. And the more I did it, I actually started to really enjoy it. So in 2019, I took a year off from screenwriting to focus on creative nonfiction and getting my foot into literary magazines. And since then, I haven't really looked back. I mean, I think I do still love movies and screenwriting. And I mean, I just think my time as a working screenwriter might have moved on.
So that's an interesting thing, like the creative nonfiction stuff. What you just like mentioned, it's interesting because I recently thought about like what we call nonfiction in general. You know, there was just like last week they announced the shortlist for the nominees for the women's fiction or women's literature prize for nonfiction, and which is great. And I was like, so how do we define nonfiction versus fiction, also versus what you might call like very dry academic writing? It's like, is a math or maths textbook, is that nonfiction or not? And it's like, how do we define these kind of terms? So I'm really interested in what is called creative nonfiction that you are focusing on. You said
So creative
memoirs and stuff like that.
nonfiction is just meant to be read like fiction.
Mhm.
That's the only thing. So a lot of true crime stories are creative nonfiction. Like, you know, what's the one everyone knows that I'm blanking on? In Cold Blood, that's creative nonfiction.
Oh yeah.
And Capote actually coined the term, which we don't use anymore, nonfiction novel, because novel only refers to fiction. So
Yeah.
nonfiction novel, that just became creative nonfiction as more people kind of picked it up, because the creativity aspect of it is just to make it read like fiction. It's not like you're making stuff up or anything. It's just you're making a story. So creative nonfiction has a story. That's probably the best way I can describe
it. So it's closer to like the long form that we see in journalism, for example, as well, right? When you sort of do like a report about something and you hang.
That'd be more of a personal essay as opposed to something like a memoir. A memoir is so you think about memoir, you think about the word memory. So it's telling a real life story as if you're writing a novel. So
would you say that there's a difference between a memoir and an autobiography?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So an autobiography is telling someone's life story. A memoir may not necessarily be your life story. It's not like
just like one event, for example.
I'm sorry?
So just like one event that like a key situation.
Yeah, like Wild by Cheryl Strayed. That one's about her mom dying and her going on that big 1,000-mile hike that she did. It's not
Yeah.
about anything else. It's
Yeah.
about that
And that
time in
would
her
be
life where
creative
she was,
nonfiction.
yeah. So it's the time in her life when she was overcoming drugs and
Yeah.
walking herself back to being a decent human being after she went nuts when her mom died.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's interesting. Like when you do something like writing creative nonfiction, like why is that one so appealing to you compared to other forms of fiction writing? Is like the
I
personal connection, or like the more like nonfiction that you have sort of like events that you can sort of base stuff around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of tugs at the. Again, I have not thought about this, but I think it might just be
I'm
more.
sorry, this is not a therapy session. I'm just
No,
asking
I
questions.
I think it might just tug a little bit more at those creativity strings, that
Mhm.
muscle that we have to kind of refine when we're being creative to make um, it something in your life read as if other people would be interested in it,
Mhm.
and to sort of dramatize your memories. And we all know memories aren't perfect. Like, we don't
Yeah.
remember things the way they actually happened, which I think is a cool thing too. We can kind of look through that sort of hazy, I don't know,
Mhm.
screen of what we remember versus what actually happened, and just tell it the
Mhm.
way we can.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. That's interesting. I just started writing it and ended up liking it. So yeah, and it is kind of fun to look back and I guess tell your story the way you want it to be told. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just like wondering because it's a very specific form of writing. I think it's maybe one that has become more popular. Like obviously,
It has.
true
It's
crime,
the fastest growing.
true crime
It's
is
the
super popular. But like a
yeah.
lot of like what people call like the I recently read this like made me really angry like article on like sad girl literature and stuff like that. It's like, and I'm
Yeah,
like, a lot of that stuff is
that's me.
yeah, and I think there's something in there which is these stories they're sort of on the border between just fiction and creative nonfiction because they
Yeah.
they do sort of embody a feeling that a lot of us have. Like obviously I'm not a sad girl, but like they do sort of express something that a lot of us feel, and
And
so
that's the
there's
thing.
something there.
It's like I'm an ordinary person,
Yeah,
but a lot of like ordinary people can be the most moving type of people. You don't have to
yeah,
be someone who went on a 1,000-mile hike to have your story be moving. Um,
yeah. I
and
can see that.
yeah, no. But I think that's kind of too what drew me to it. That this sort of, it always comes with this little kind of quiet intensity that I think
Yeah,
is really moving to a lot of people, and it's fun to write. So yeah.
yeah. That I think that's like the other part that I find interesting is like unless you have like a really crazy life, it's like this like if I write sort of memoir stuff about my own life, it's like I need to sort of find the interesting bits in the mundane, like the extraordinary in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mundane, and sort of
I,
tease that out and turn that into something.
and that's something I love. I mean, I really love Raymond Carver, how he takes those
Mhm.
mundane, very, very mundane situations, and something like what we talk about when we talk about love or Cathedral,
Yeah,
and just how emotive and intense they really are at the end. Like what we talk about when we talk about love, it's two couples, like about to go to dinner, like they're on their way
yeah,
out, and there's this hugely memorable and brilliant story that these people are telling, like,
yeah.
can we go now? Like, let's just go to dinner, kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting about that. Like on the other side is yeah, to tease out those very specific things and make them interesting. And I was wondering because that's something that you also I feel like the creative nonfiction stuff is something that lends itself in a way to the short story compared to like a novel. On the one hand, I think it's also something that might be closer to screenwriting because a lot of screenwriting, a lot of the way we do stuff on screen is
Mhm.
also portraying the mundane. Yes, you have all the extraordinary stuff in like your Marvel movie
Yeah.
or whatever, but like a lot of stuff, there's more attention paid to the mundane in screenplays than there is in your epic fantasy novel. We don't see
Yeah.
Aragorn go and take a shit behind a tree. We don't get
No.
that, but we
No.
may get that bathroom
Thankfully.
scene in a movie.
Yeah. I think that whole movie was just him taking a shit, or the director just taking a shit on all of us. Really, how stupid do you think we are? I've seen the movie. I haven't really read the book, but that
It's a good
movie
book.
was that was such a bad movie. It was like almost so bad it was good. Like the
That's an interesting take. I'm very neutral on Lord of the Rings movies. I have no opinions on that.
on what, on the Lord of the Rings, or
Which one are you talking about right now?
well, I was talking about Aragon, and it's just a Lord of the Rings
Oh yeah,
ripoff.
yeah.
So
True. Yeah,
and it
I
was
did not watch that. I did not
yeah,
watch that. I did not read the book. I know it was formative for a lot of younger people.
yeah.
I
There's like
don't.
an alternate Harry Potter for some people.
So I'm willing to forgive these books a lot because they bring people into reading. So I get that. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
to bring it back though, I think yeah, that like movies, especially when then not your epic fantasy movie, a lot of these focus more on mundane things, so they might be tied closer to the short story. What you said earlier, that short
Mhm.
story writing is much closer to writing screenplays, and that might also be sort of why a lot of this creative nonfiction kind of fits in that same range, which is all about like finding out, yeah, the particular in just your human experience, your daily human
It
experience.
is, and a lot of it too is reflecting on the past, which
Mm,
is something that I think a lot of people connect with too. We all have a past, and it's all unique to us. But the way we see the past, I think, is a really human thing too. Because I mean, we know animals have memories and stuff, but I doubt that
yeah,
they reflect upon their memories. Like, you get a dog or a guinea pig, and you come home and they know who you are, so obviously they have
yeah.
memories, but are they going to sit there brooding over their past? I don't know. That's probably a very human thing. And biggest bad right here, just
Yeah.
asked me a question. Any
Yeah, so that.
showrunners you really wanted to work with and why? Chris from The Bear. I actually haven't seen that, sadly, but I do kind of know him, and he's a brilliant guy. But one that I would love to work with, which I probably never will because I'm not that good, would be the showrunner from Battlestar Galactica, Outlander, and now the Spicy Fairies. Oh, Akatar. I'd love to work with him, but no, it's not gonna happen. Yeah, because his I don't just the idea of him running Battlestar Galactica and then Outlander and now A Court of Thorns and Roses. There's got to be something going on with him that's quite a shift, and it's just getting sexier and sexier as it goes on.
There's definitely that,
Yeah,
which might be weird because he's definitely getting older,
he is.
which
I
you
think
can't help.
he's like almost in his 50s, if not already,
Yeah, but his protagonists
or
stay
getting
young or get
younger.
even younger. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but like I think like part of that is that with both Battlestar Galactica and I think like I'm not into Akatar, so I have no idea about that. I enjoyed Battlestar Galactica. I think there's a willingness in what he does to go into the more theatric, into the more dramatic, to be willing to sort of embrace kitsch when it comes up. That is helpful both with Outlander and very much will be helpful with Akatar. That say Battlestar Galactica had compared to some other sci-fi stories, like sci-fi shows, like say The Expanse, which is trying to sort of realistic, which is why they cut the last couple of books, which are more over the top. And I think that might be why he might actually be a good choice for those kind of stories because he's clearly willing to embrace that sort of more dramatic element that these stories kind of need.
And I feel he brings when he gets into the characters, he really like focuses on their intelligence level
Mhm.
that I've
Yeah.
noticed. If you read the Outlander books, and quite honestly, Rafe, you might like them. Like they kind of get a bad rap because they're seen as sort of mommy porn, which in a way they are, but there's also more to them. And the main character in that, Claire, her intelligence is a huge part
Hmm.
of the books, and I feel like he really kind of brought that through to the
Hmm.
show big time. Um,
Yeah.
but also, again, in that the quiet moments between, the family members
Mm.
is a huge part of just what makes Outlander what it is. Those familial
Yeah.
relationships that are complex and kind of dysfunctional, but sort of not really. And then you've got the magical realism element. But I have read ACOTAR, and especially in the last one, I did a a reading blog of me reading the Spicy Fairy Smut, and there was a big aspect of the main character in that one who's the oldest sister, and the younger sister like being the responsible one and like trying to control her, that honestly really spoke to me more than I thought a smut book would. So
Yeah.
while yes, these are kind of silly, girly, stupid things, I think when he gets a hold of ACOTAR, he may be able to pull that out.
Mm.
Definitely more than SJM did. But Diana Gabaldon of Outlander is an amazing writer. But SJM, Sarah J. Maas, I don't know if we can say that about her, but she knows what she's writing, so she's self-aware. But Diana Gabaldon, her writing, I think is really underrated, and I think men are kind of hesitant to give her a chance because it is listed under romance. The whole thing, like the central part of it, is Jamie and Claire's love story. I hate Jamie in both the show and the books, but I
Mm.
think what keeps me going through it is definitely the family ties and how she explores family.
Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a bunch of more questions about your connections to screenwriting that I think might be interesting. Just like people that both Ori and Daniel talking about different showrunners and what they're doing now. But I think that's interesting. So you said like you'd love to work with yeah, the guy who does now Akatar, but the other one that you met in person said like he's a brilliant the writer guy who did the Bear. Um,
Yeah, Chris.
Chris, so you plan to go back into screenwriting if you have the chance, or is that something that is completely behind you?
If I had the chance, yes. It's not something I'm pursuing right now. Um, but I would go back definitely.
Hmm.
Um, but right now I'm focusing on prose. I think I just needed a change of pace, and um,
Mm.
I had been screenwriting from. I mean, when I seriously started, I was like 16, and I did a good 12 years, 16 to 28, I think. And
Mm.
28 is when I really started like moving away because I had to go to real life because I was out of insurance and had to get a real job and all that shit that happens in America. And yeah, so I did a good 12 years of screenwriting. Only about 3 of those were being like actually what we would call like making it and working. But I've only put in now 2.5 years into really seriously writing prose. So who knows how long this prose kick is gonna last?
So here's an interesting thing, though. So you moved to prose, and you said you're now writing for like literary magazines and stuff like that. And I think this is interesting. So you're writing. You said creative nonfiction, which is closer to like memoir and stuff like that, and I think that's interesting because you're sort of hanging out in at the fringes of the more like fantasy, epic fantasy, sci-fi, whatever book you part. And it's like, but what you're writing is way closer to like what you might say call literary fiction or
Yeah, yeah,
adjacent.
yes,
And what I find interesting is like how is that world different from the fantasy sci-fi world when it comes to writing? Because you just went to that big writer conference
yes.
in Kansas or wherever it was.
Yeah, it changes every year. It was in
Yeah.
Kansas City this year, so it was in Missouri. It wasn't in Kansas, but
Oh, in Kansas City, yeah.
yeah.
You
Um,
guys need to get your geography sorted out at some point.
well, I mean, our entire country, I think, might be bigger than Europe. So It's
You might still be wrong about stuff, though.
and I'm in Texas, which is bigger than Germany. I think like 12 Germanys could fit inside Texas. Probably not. Germany's big, but
Look, Germany,
probably
Germany
about
is
the same
wrong.
size now that I think about it. But we
Germany
have
is
lots of
wrong about a
Germans
lot
in
of things.
Texas. And a fun fact, Rafe, I don't know if I told you this. My
Yeah.
great grandfather, I think I did tell you, was an illegal immigrant from Germany.
Oh, yeah, you said
Yeah,
that.
I think I told you that. And I also sent you Texas German, didn't I? The I don't know if you watched it. It's a lady down in Central Texas, where my family's from,
Hmm.
speaking the Texas dialect of German that's starting
Hey,
to kind of
yeah,
die
you
out.
sent me that. I watched that. It's really interesting because it's like way more like the Northern German dialect, which is
That's what you told me.
yeah, it's way different from like there's this like big cut between the like what we call like a Low German.
In High German.
Um, the interesting thing is that Hochdeutsch is not High German, although it translates as that as such. The High German is like sort of Celtic influenced Alemannic dialect, which is what you get like in southern Germany and in
Okay.
Switzerland and parts of Austria. And the Low German is what you get well in northern Germany, and it's closer to like Dutch and has more influences from like English as well. So it's closer to English in a lot of ways. Which
To be quite honest, I don't know where he was from, but as he got older, he forgot how to speak English. So it was kind of funny. But yeah, so what we
yeah,
were talking about, how I ended up in fantasy. It was when I got back into um, reading novels. I don't know how many of you in the chat or you, Rafe, experience ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response. Like there are
mm,
ASMR videos all over YouTube,
yeah,
but
no,
that doesn't mean that you actually experience the phenomenon that is ASMR. It's like
I
the
don't.
tingling in your scalp, like you know if you got it, and
Yeah.
you look a little confused. I don't think you get it, but sorry, having to swallow away my sore throat. Um, um, this is weird. Like this is so weird. I promise you, there is nothing sexual about it. But they do like role plays where you're at a library and they're suggesting books to you. And I was watching once on my smart TV, and
Mm,
I was just letting it roll as I wrote, and then it went from an ASMR video of a bookshop role play to Peru's project, whatever. I don't
mm,
know, that girl who lives in New York reads some fantasy. It's like Perseus
mm,
of Peru's project. She's a big one.
okay.
And I accidentally discovered BookTube, and then nothing sexual about it. That's what they all say. It's true. And then, um, and then I think the first one that after her that got, I guess, just up next in the queue was Mike's book reviews, then Daniel Green. And so that's how I ended up on fantasy. And I was a huge fan of the show Game of Thrones. I'm not picking up the books because I always say, better a bad ending than no ending at all. Okay. I'm just going to put that out there. But
I have not yet watched the show. I'm one of the cool kids. I started reading Game of Thrones. I started university, and a friend that I had like philosophy classes with, he came back from like flying well, like Christmas break and whatever. He came back and he's like, "Yeah, my cousin who lives in the States just brought me this book, and it's awesome. You got to read it." And that was Game of Thrones, and that
yeah.
was in 2004.
Okay.
And then I
Well,
started reading Game of Thrones, and I was finished with the first three books when Feast for Crows came out, and then yeah, it's
first of
terrible.
all, G.R.R. Mim is a dick. He owes us those books. I don't care what anybody else says. Writers do owe their readers books. Absolutely. Um, Showrunners owe their viewers episodes. Like, I will not hear anything else about that. But
I think like the main question that I'm always asking both with like George R. Martin and with Patrick Rothfuss is like, don't they have like contracts with publishers that say they need to deliver shit at some point? Is
I don't know. That is a good question. Um,
like I was just
hello.
wondering about that because I think that an artist does not owe the audience anything. there is definitely a promise that you make when you say, like, I'm going to write this many novels. You do make the promise to do that. It's not like an enforceable thing, but
I mean, no,
if a
it's not.
publisher,
But
yeah,
yeah, you earn that backlash if you don't deliver
yeah,
on what the expectations that you've
yeah,
set.
yeah. And I was just like wondering because, like, you know, both of these authors, they are like signed to major publishers, and I assume that there's contracts that have like some sort of, penalties or whatever. Because I know from like record labels from like the music industry, if you're a band, you're signed for like a 5 album contract. You better deliver those 5 albums because they're
I
gonna
know
fuck
he
you up.
originally thought it was going to be a trilogy, so maybe he sold it as a trilogy.
Maybe that's that.
Yeah.
So that no one has leverage over him.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I ended up in fantasy, and I mean, that's where I stayed, I guess. I don't know. Um, I like reading fantasy. I just don't think I mean, I did have an idea for a fantasy novel that I may start writing because, again, it was kind of like, approaching long forms. Like, I don't think I could ever do that. But the more fantasy I read, I kind of got an idea for fantasy, which I may write. I don't know, maybe not. Like, epic fantasy is kind of out right now because they're so expensive because you got to sign them for big book deals and all that. And since Game of Thrones has ended, now it's mostly romantasy that people are into. Um, but yeah, I kind of like the fantasy community. I like the people, even though, I mean, there's that group that doesn't like me, and I don't really like
Yeah.
them because I think they're dishonest. And that's a big thing about the fantasy community is they're a lot more accepting of, oh, this is going to get me, mediocrity. Um, and people, oh, they work so hard on their books. Why would you say something bad? Like, that's not something you're going to find in the literary community at all. You're not going to find people even cracking open a self-published book. People might say, this is elitism. I disagree. I don't think it's elitism. I just think it's writing and reading for a different purpose than people who read fantasy.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for. Also, I really appreciate your idea there, biggest making George R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss watch Misery again and again until
Yeah.
they start finishing books. I'm not sure if that works, but it's certainly worth a try. Also,
Yeah,
to be fair,
he
George
burned
R.
it at
Martin is
the
watching
end and killed her. So I don't know. That kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, but I was interested in like how the literary fiction world. You said like you submit to magazines and stuff, like how that is different from the fantasy and science fiction world, because I think it's very different in attitude and like approach in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
very
I'm just
different.
interested in that, how that feels and how you see that.
Very different attitude. Just I want to say more serious. Like, they put a lot more thought into what they're going to read, and the literary merit is really important. Not so, like, I don't want to say that sales aren't important, but they put more emphasis on how good your writing is versus necessarily what you're writing. So a lot of people will say, oh, the writing was, like, in the fantasy community, oh, the writing wasn't great, but I still enjoyed the story. Like, if you have bad writing but a good story in literary, I would disagree with this. Gin or Chin, for the most part, they want to keep people out, and fantasy doesn't want to keep people out. They don't want to keep people out. They want to bring in the best that they can bring, which is different. Like, anybody can get in if you're willing to take criticism and work hard enough and make your writing the best it can be. Whereas fantasy, I don't think they care as much about the literary merit of what you're writing.
I think, but that's sort of, I think, like another part that is probably interesting to talk about, like how we define literary merit and how we define good writing versus bad writing. Because we have like a lot of people on BookTube or on Goodreads or whatever, they read a book and they go like, "This has bad writing," and then they just stop there. It's like, how do you define bad writing? And I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can't define bad writing.
Okay.
I think you can.
You can.
But I think it's important you actually do that, because if I just read your review and go like, this is bad writing, I will take my assumptions of what I think bad writing is and put them over that. But because I
I'm
don't know
looking
the other
for some
person.
good writing right now. So I'm going to the Sun magazine and current issue. Let's do, okay, that's in this issue. Let's see. Let's get the creative nonfiction. Let's see, essays, memoirs, and true story. Okay. All right, so let's see. I'll read this paragraph. If you were a man who lived in Washington state in the early 2000s and you threw a phone at your spouse or exhibited worrisome behaviors in front of your parole officer, you might have been referred to anger management program for men at Seaport Medical Center. For a year, I worked in the clinic there as a research assistant, making handouts for the groups and role playing with the men to test their ability to control their tempers. So that's from the Sun, which is, I would say that's more of an essay than. Let me go to archives.
Yeah.
January 2024. Let's see what they got. Interview.
What I found interesting
Here
that
we
these
go.
guys, they were.
I read this one. I really thought the writing was great in this one.
Yeah.
This is called Abandon All Expectations. My girlfriend, Murray, accuses me of collecting 75-year-old men. The first time she said this, it stung, but I have to admit she's right. And isn't part of a modern relationship being able to see yourself through the other person's eyes? In my 50s, I have sought out and befriended many older guys, men who hail from another, more literary world, a fabled land of failed marriages, bankruptcies, and plantar fasciitis. So plantar's warts, I guess. So yeah, that was from the Sun. That was creative nonfiction. I would call that good writing.
Okay, so what does make that good writing? And that's sort of like what I find interesting. And there's like one bit in the essay you read before, where it talks about like working for, like, found yourself in the program and so forth. And he drops the A in, like, if I would write this as someone who does not speak English that well, and it doesn't have like a formal education, anything, I would put like in you would find yourself in a program for, or whatever. It's like, it's these small things that make language sort of work better, and I would not know how to describe that and how to actually formalize that. But it's that kind of stuff that I find interesting, how you sort of build a rhythm in language.
Yeah, that does not translate well between languages at all.
Yeah,
because I speak Spanish, so that's, I mean, English and German, we're part of the same language family.
Yeah.
I think Spanish is a Romance language. Like, it is so different the way it's structured and the rhythm to it. And I mean, translating Spanish to English, it just doesn't sound right if you're going to do it literary. But what makes what I just read good writing is it's succinct, it has a voice, and it gets across a lot of information in a fairly small bit of time, but not in an overwhelming way.
And
there's not too many words. That is a big thing. If you use too many words to say something, that's bad writing.
And that's kind of what I was like looking at, because I think there's ways to write with way too many words.
Yes,
that sounds good.
Exactly.
But
yeah.
It's sort of like, that's kind of where the voice part comes in. It's like, if you want to do something very specific, if you want to go for like a very Baroque style of writing, because you'll say like Ada Palmer and her Terra Ignota series, or Neil Stephenson's Baroque cycle, or what's her name, Susanna Clarke, and the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, right? They're like, she's going for like a Regency England style of language, and obviously that is a different way of writing stuff. So I think voice is really important, and one of the things that
the word we use, which you talked about rhythm in writing. The word we use to describe a bad rhythm is clunky.
Yeah.
So writing that is clunky, and when you read good writing and then you read bad writing, you can feel it. The difference between the overall sentence structure, what we call in creative writing on a sentence level. That is really what sets apart a good writer from a bad writer. Like, I did a vlog where I read The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. Like, if you want to understand what I'm talking about, like, watch that vlog. not the
Mhm.
review, the blog, where where I describe him as someone who can tell a great story but can't write, and they're not the same skill.
I always make the difference. I have not read Dan Brown in English, so I don't know about his style.
It's
Stephen King is the
it
person I
is
always pull out for that.
it's crazy.
Yeah, Stephen King is the person I always pick for that because
I've
Stephen
only
King,
read one
in
book.
my experience, is like except for the Gunslinger where he comes straight off like creative writing. He does all the things where he figures out how to do style and whatnot.
I kind of
Like
want to read
other,
that, but I know how it ends and how it begins.
I think the Gunslinger is a really good book. I got bored afterwards, and I
Hmm.
read other Stephen King stuff, and he has good ideas, and he's a good storyteller. He has good ideas for stories, but I something just like bores me in the way he uses language, and partly that's definitely me because I'm
I mean, I don't know. I've only read Elevation by him. Liked it well
okay.
enough.
But
It's
I think
weird.
it's important to understand the difference between, writer and storyteller. And I think a lot of people kind of mix the two, especially in fantasy, where there is so much of a focus on plot and sometimes characters. Although I'm not sure if people actually understand what they mean by
Yeah,
characters. But
exactly.
and,
Um,
and that's like
this is
another
what
part that I find interesting. That like
Stephen
we
King
need
would
to
be
figure
so
out
much better if he
terminology.
wrote short stories. I'm talking over you, Rafe. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no worries. It's
Um,
good.
we know Jake, the bookish drummer. You know who that is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He's said that he thinks Stephen King is at his peak writing novellas. Like he thinks Stephen King is the best novella writer there is. So this person
yeah,
said he'd be so much better if he wrote short
yeah.
stories. King does write short stories, I'm pretty sure.
He
Um,
has written short stories in the past. He's mostly writing novels now, but he's done short stories in the past.
and I think the only thing I read by him was a novella, and I liked it. So yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. But that's like another thing. Is like because short stories, and I think Stephen Erickson said that at some point, and that he structures individual chapters as short stories because short
Yeah.
stories force you to actually weigh every word. If you just write a novel and you have like 100,000 words, you can
Yes.
waste words. You can use words for whatever. Like
That.
if you have 10,000 words, you need to make every word count. And that's
Yes. Yes. And
yeah,
um, you, sir, that is good writing. Is making
yeah,
every word count. Bad
yeah,
writing is vomiting words on the page, like someone like Dan Brown does. But that's okay. Like if you're not reading short stories, you're missing out because short stories are amazing. But taking that, making every word count on a sentence level and
mm,
in like the plot, wasting no space, um, not being clunky,
yeah,
that's what the literary novels do. That, I mean, I guess fantasy nowadays we could say does that. I don't know. But like 15, 20 years ago, the stuff that was coming out
mm,
definitely was not as crisp on a writing level as it is now because one, it's expensive to print books, so shorter the better. And
mm,
two, that did kind of form with the like literary magazines really are on the cutting edge of
yeah,
everything. They're discovering new writers. That's what they love to do.
yeah,
Like Juno Diaz, the New Yorker, takes a lot of credit for him. But
yeah,
writing. So what we see with short stories, with those shorter sentences that are still lyrical in a way,
mm,
that has moved into like literary fiction, and it hasn't
yeah.
hit fantasy. I don't know if it will, but that's definitely where it started. That making every word count, and that's bridged over to actual novel writing now.
Yeah, I think
So
it's interesting. Back in
yeah,
the day, I remember that, like Joe Abercrombie, whom a lot of people love, and I understand why. He used to work in television, not as a screenwriter, but actually as an editor and cutting and stuff. But
uh,
um, he
very
wrote
very
like
important and thankless job, by the way.
yeah,
Unsung heroes.
and but it's interesting, like he wrote like a blog about like his progress of a novel, and he said like I write a first draft, and between the first and the second draft I cut out about a third of the words. I'll
Yeah,
just like cut out stuff because I write the
yeah,
story just as I think, and then I'll cut out stuff and
yep,
figure out how to make things
hmm,
tighter and so forth. And I think that's an interesting aspect that a lot of
yep.
people misunderstand. It's like your second draft doesn't have to be longer. It
No,
might just
I,
be that you just like you brain vomit anything on the page and then you figure out what to delete.
Yeah, my first novel, the first one that I ever finished, I cut out 20,000 words from the first draft to the draft I'm
Yeah.
currently on. And it's still long. It's 104,000 words, so it's still too long. But
Yeah, I just found that interesting for someone who is writing epic fantasy, at least on paper. And it's like, yeah, it's about cutting out stuff and figuring out how much can you take out for it to still work, and
yeah,
that's sort of what you do. And I think that's something that a lot of us kind of miss because there is that like parallel motion in fantasy where we think that like bigger books are better, and you have those Brandon Sanderson fans who use the argument that his books are, I don't know, 1,200 pages long as an argument why he's a good writer. I'm like, no, that means he's a good typist. But that's not
yeah.
necessarily the same thing.
And he had already paid his dues before he was able to do that. So let's not forget that. I mean, what was his first book? Like, I don't know.
Elantris was the first published one, I think.
Okay, how big is that? That's not that big, is it?
I have not checked. I would say 600 pages, I
I'm
think.
going to Goodreads. Let's see.
I think the audiobook has like something like 20 hours, which I would translate into like 500 to 600 pages.
Yeah,
Roughly.
638 words. Okay. And it was published in 2005. It was cheaper to print books back then. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting to see how these things change because when you plan something as a novel, oftentimes people are more forgiving. And I tell this epic story, and then I just like write this thing.
Rafe, you've moved away from the mic. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I hope it works.
When you write this epic story, and then we lost you.
Yeah. Can you hear me again?
Yep.
Very good. As like when you write like an epic story, you kind of just like think on the whole story, and you don't necessarily think about the chapters, and that's fine. You have people who just like ignore chapters, like Terry Pratchett doesn't. In most Discworld novels, there are no chapters. He just like writes 80,000 words. It's like, this is my novel. Deal with it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put like chapters in, you kind of need to sort of build structure in like a different way. And I just find it interesting that fantasy is more on like the storytelling side of things compared to like the writing side of things. And I'm always wondering, like, because we apply literary terminology to a lot of stuff when we do reviews. Like, I don't do reviews, but we use the terminology, but we often kind of don't understand that. And I think that's sort of like why I find it interesting to talk to you about this stuff, because you're reading fantasy, but you're writing nonfiction, and you're creative nonfiction, you're writing literary fiction. So you're sort of like in both worlds, and like the difference between the two, I don't think it's just like elitism and snobism, which is certainly there. You have people who do,
and that's why people don't like me, because they think I'm elitist, and I'm not.
Like, there is.
That's one of the reasons. Don't be fooled. No. they think I'm elitist.
Oh yeah. I totally agree with that. The problem is there is a form of elitism in parts of the literary fiction community towards what you might call what they call genre fiction.
Fiction.
I remember that back in the day in the Languages of Truth essay collection by Salman Rushdie, where he talks about the essay is called Wonder Tales, and he talks about like how he's not writing fantasy because fantasy is trash, and he's writing magical realism. And then he kind of picks on Twilight and Hunger Games as trash, and for some reason thinks that Harry Potter is actually good. And I'm like,
well, first of all, Twilight and Harry Potter are not magical realism. So magical realism is a little bit hard to wrap your head around. But no, Harry Potter and Twilight are what's called low fantasy. So magical realism would be where Outlander is low fantasy as well. So, and also the comic fables. So magical low fantasy is where you have the fantasy aspect that takes place in the real world, and then you have the normal people, and there's a huge divide.
Yeah.
Okay. So Harry Potter, you have the wizards and the muggles. It would be like if
I felt that he mostly makes that difference.
Magical realism is where normal people are going about their everyday life, and fantastical things happen, but they don't question it. So if it just started raining flowers right now in my bedroom, and I'd be like, okay, and just wouldn't think anything of it. That's magical realism.
I think like so. My sinister, cynical approach is that he trashes Twilight and Hunger Games because those were written by American authors, and he praises Harry Potter because while he may be an Indian citizen, he's very British affiliated, and Harry Potter is written by someone with a UK citizenship. Um, I think, and I think the difference between magical realism and fantasy at large is mostly a school or tradition versus genre thing. Because
Well, it's a
there,
subgenre. No matter what anybody says, it is a
yeah, but
subgenre of fantasy.
yeah, but it's also very much a subgenre kind of tied to very specific authors being in conversation with each other, sometimes actually knowing each other. A lot of
Yeah.
the heavy focus is on Latin America,
Yes,
South
I was about to
America.
say, don't do Latin America dirty like that.
No, but that's the point. It's like it's very much about who is talking to whom as people and who are in conversation as authors. So that's what I mean, like by like a group of people, like a school in like the Athenian philosophy sense of school or like a tradition. It's not just a subgenre. It's also because these people
Yeah.
interact with each other outside of just what they're writing.
Yeah,
And I
Gabriel
think that's something
Garcia.
that is important there. And I
Yeah.
see, yeah, I don't know.
What
But
people are saying in the comments is really cool. So Daniel Clauser right here, you are correct. That is the definition of magical realism. Tends to be fantasy where no one seems to recognize that the fantastical elements violate normal consensus reality. Yes, that is it. So that's actually a much better way of saying what I was trying to say. I always
yeah,
assumed magical realism was just fantasy with plausible deniability. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but what Daniel set up here is
yeah.
actually correct.
But that's like the interesting thing. Like an author that I personally really appreciate, Ian MacDonald. He's a sci-fi author.
Rafe, I literally thought you said before. I thought you said eating McDonald's.
No, no, no.
Ian McDonald. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Ian MacDonald. He's half Scottish, but grew up in Ireland, so it's very complicated. And he wrote like one of his first novels. It's called Desolation Road, and it's a really interesting thing because it's basically a sci-fi novel, but it's also very much magical realism because a lot of like just like surrealist stuff happens that people just like take in stride. And it's
Yep.
all set on Mars. It's a fantasy novel set on Mars when no one questions that like some people are just like plants or something. I was like, oh,
I gotta read that. That sounds
it's
trippy.
really good.
Oh, I mean, I
Um,
guess a good way to describe it would be like an acid trip. I said that sounds
yeah,
trippy. So yeah, an acid trip. That'd be good.
it's
But
trippy
if
and
you
really
want to
good.
understand magical realism, probably the best place to start to dip your toe in and get a good sense of what magical realism should be. It's called An Extremely Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a short story. It's moving and creepy, and yeah.
Okay. I think it's like obviously Gabriel Garcia Marquez is like the one that everyone
Yeah.
knows and everyone's like you got to read.
Well, that's why we studied it in an intermediate level writing class, Rafe.
That's I always felt that like maybe like the more approachable writer might be Isabel Allende
Yeah, maybe.
as a more approachable writer, but it's sort of like still in the same like ballpark of stuff.
Um,
Then you
Also,
can go and
if you
read A
want
Hundred
like
Years of
more
Solitude at some
modern
point. Mhm,
or contemporary, not modern, excuse me.
mhm.
Pat, it's not Patrick Rothfuss. Patrick Ness, A Monster Calls. That's magical realism,
Okay.
and it's very sad, and it made me cry. And it's YA, so yeah, very easy, beautiful illustrations.
Yes, Britton, you should pick up A Brief History of Seven Killings. It's an absolute monster of a book. It's incredibly powerful. It's wonderful. It's also mostly written in Jamaican patois, so get ready to deal with that. It was very hard for me, but then again, I'm German. I assume it's still hard for most English speakers as well because what
Probably.
he does and what I think is interesting about Brief History of Seven Killings is because all of these are fairly stream of consciousness, first person, jumps between different point of views and so forth, is that he uses different strengths of patois as a way to signify class or class difference.
Ah,
So it does make a difference how heavy the patois is, because it's important to signify class, which is a way how class is signified within Jamaica. It's like, obviously it kind of sort of is parallel to skin color, but it is like a way people talk about like treat you depending on how you speak, and he kind of uses that within the narrative, which is hard. But go read the book; it's absolutely fucking amazing. It's also brutal, and yeah, it did win a Booker Prize for a reason. Is my point.
yeah,
You don't win Man Booker prizes for nothing.
that's true. But so, speaking of Booker Prize, one thing I've noticed is that my genre, historical fiction, has exploded in the literary world as far as books. I mean, we had Shuggy Bane, we had Hilary Mantel, whatever, Wolf Hall,
Yeah,
both win
yeah,
Bookers, um, Northwoods, I think, I don't know, the one with the mountain lion on the cover. Like, they've gotten, like, historical fiction has boomed into the literary world. And I'm so happy to see that, because I think writers have finally realized what an amazing canvas it makes for storytelling and just writing in general.
yeah. Here's an interesting thing. You said like your genre is historical fiction. I know
Yeah, literary
you're currently
historical. But
currently writing a historical fiction novel on and stuff like that. Like, why
yes,
historical fiction? What's interesting you? What draws you to historical fiction?
I'm get like it just popped into my head. Same thing that draws me to creative nonfiction. Real life is better than fiction sometimes. I was talking to my friend because he was reading The White Queen by Philippa Gregory,
Hmm.
and he needed a little history lesson. So I
Hmm.
told him, I was like, okay, well, the way the Wars of the Roses started was, Henry VI was very mentally ill. So his cousin, who is a descendant of, they're all descendants of
Yeah.
Edward III, blah, blah, blah. They got together, and then there was a battle because Edward IV's father was trying to take the crown, and they were captured as prisoners. But then Margaret of Anjou cut their heads off, stuck their heads on spikes, and put a paper crown on his head to mock him.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I went into more detail. But then
Hmm.
my friend was like, how do people say history is boring after what you just told me? So I
Oh,
think
that's
you put
yeah.
ordinary people into incredible situations like that. It's just amazing. It makes a brilliant story. So my
Yeah.
first historical fiction novel was set during World War One, and then I did the American Civil War as kind of my whole apology for everything my ancestors did. And then now I'm working on a medieval novel about William the Conqueror's mother.
Mm. So that's like an interesting question that recently came up in like a Discord conversation I was in, and I'd just be interested on your takes. Like, when does something become historical fiction? Like, how far in the past does it have to be set to be historical fiction for you?
It doesn't have to be okay. Well, this
But
this
like, I have an opinion on that. I'm just interested in your take on it.
so it, for something to be classified as historical fiction, it technically only has to revolve around a historical event.
Hmm.
So I could write, even though it was just a few months ago, if I wrote a novel about October 7th, that could
Yeah,
still be historical fiction. But
yeah,
also, just taking place in the past is another
mm,
one. So it is
yeah,
kind of a nebulous thing. Like, I almost cried basically when I saw that a book set in 1992 was historical fiction. Sierra
yeah,
is born, but also it was set around like the whole Rodney King thing. So um, like,
yeah,
a book set in the 70s, that'd be historical fiction, even if the 70s is just a backdrop. But if I were to write something about, like the Capitol insurrection, even though it's only been a couple years,
yeah,
that would be historical fiction too, as long
yeah.
as that's like the central thing.
Yeah. I think for me, like the main thing is that you're right about something that is in the past. So it's not like something that is happening right now. Like, technically, yesterday is the past. I feel like 20 years, 25 years feels like that's when I think of something as the past. So like right now, I think like the big event where I would call something historical fiction versus contemporary fiction, I guess. Like October 7th last year, I would call it contemporary fiction.
Mhm.
9/11, I would call historical fiction at this
Yeah,
point.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say 9/11. But
But it
yeah,
is sort of like the event that like for like each generation we sort
yeah,
of have like that one event where like the first time we're sort of conscious of like the world being the world, and
yeah.
like it might have been the fall of the Berlin Wall for like the generation before me. I was slightly too young for that. And 9/11 is definitely one of those. It's like I know where I was
I don't have any
exactly.
memories before 9/11. I mean, I do, but I don't remember like a pre 9/11 versus post 9/11 world, honestly.
Yeah, but
I
like
do
for
like
me,
I would say probably the big event would be COVID. That first really kind of I feel like there was a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world. But I don't remember the world before 9/11 being any different. Like I don't remember like I had been on flights, but I don't
hmm,
remember security being different. I just don't. Like I mean I
hmm,
was 8, so I mean I
yeah, I
have
was.
memories that I know happened before 9/11, but it doesn't feel like a different world the way pre versus post COVID does.
Yeah, I was 16. For me, like 9/11 was sort of like I was aware enough for stuff to, to feel different.
Mm-hmm.
But like the interesting thing, it was sort of like I think what makes something like September 11, like 9/11, or what makes the actual fall of the Berlin Wall, or certain things like different from say COVID in a way is
It's like that
it's more like, yeah, exactly. It's like like I can pinpoint the actual like
moment.
scene where I am when someone tells me about 9/11, and I'm like, holy fuck. And because COVID kind of crept up on us, we kind of knew about it. We ignored it for like a couple of weeks, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I guess this is
Now,
real.
now that I think about it, maybe Sandy Hook was probably yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That
that
was
might
probably
be.
yeah. That's probably like that one event where okay, this was pre Sandy Hook, this is after Sandy
Yeah,
Hook. Yeah,
this
which
like
is a
this
mass shooting
moment where
for you
yeah this
non-Americans.
this moment where you go like, oh, I know exactly where I was when I heard about this very specific thing.
Emergency room.
Yeah,
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 I I was in the emergency room. Parkland. I was um, in my study of the short story class. Uvalde, I was in my classroom, and Uvalde, I think, did some irreversible damage to me because 80% of my students are Hispanic.
yeah.
And that was the first school shooting that happened when I was actually a teacher, and it was in Texas. And that was the first time where I was like, oh shit, that could have been me. So, yeah,
It's
there's
kind of
definitely,
it's kind of shocking and frustrating that like so many of the scenes you just like brought up are old school shootings, and I'm like, holy shit.
yeah, I've,
That
I've been in a few. It's like all the teachers have, we all have connections. Like I knew somebody over in Uvalde. I have ties to
mhm,
Uvalde. I have ties to Parkland.
yeah.
But Uvalde and Nashville are the two ones where I like actually know people who are
Mm.
involved.
Yeah. And that I think that's like another thing that is like I don't want to go too deep into that unless you want to, because I
Hmm.
live over here in the promised land of no guns or very few guns and whatnot. It's like the reality of school shootings is something, or like the way it has sort of become like the normal in the US from
Hmm.
from the outside is something that is really weird to me and really hard to understand.
Yeah, because the Second Amendment. I don't remember Virginia Tech exponentiate. I don't remember that one to be honest. Um, I knew how bad. I just didn't remember. I was actually I was in a troubled teen facility, so we were very sheltered. We didn't get to watch TV or anything like that. So yeah, that one I don't remember. Sandy Hook's the first one I remember. Um, but the thing is, the way our government's structured is, it's not a direct democracy. We elect representatives.
Yeah.
So we know the solution to gun violence. We just have to get our representatives to cooperate, and we
Yeah.
can't. It's like no one gives a crap about the Second Amendment. Like, so what?
Yeah.
But it's like the people who do have crept their way into getting their reps into office.
Mhm.
And um, part of the problem, too, is that we're United States. We all have our own laws. But
Mm.
to get a federal ban on assault weapons, well, that's common sense to most people. You get people who live out in the middle of nowhere and they think, all the bleeding heart Dems are stupid and, oh, we just need to focus on mental health first. And it's like they don't realize that, no, you cannot fix these psychopaths. You can stop their access to guns, but then they'll just throw the Second Amendment at you. And it's like, that was 200 and something years ago. Like,
Also, it means a well-regulated militia, and a well-regulated militia is not everyone having their assault rifle at home and doing
no,
bullshit with it.
no, definitely.
That's not
I will
well-regulated.
say, I do own a gun because there are bobcats out here and they scare the shit out of me. So I have a gun. But exactly, yes, I was about to say the feral hogs. Yes, the boars. I hate those friggin' boars. And yes, an AR is pretty much the only thing that can take them down.
Look,
It's
they
not
got,
enough to keep ARs though.
they got Joffrey's dad. They will get you.
Yeah,
How
exactly.
fucking
They
dangerous.
will. They're scary. Yes, but they'll still do it. See, there's stuff like that. Like they'll still get their hands on guns. Like,
I do believe that actually destigmatizing mental health and having access to mental health care is also, a good thing.
yeah, but it's not directly linked to our gun problem. No way.
No. They're two things that are related, but they're
They're not
complex.
causal. Like it's not cause and effect with that.
No, it's not cause and effect. They're linked, but they're not directly related.
You get all the people who are like, well, people get drugs. Why wouldn't they get guns? And it's like, dude, like, do you not understand? Like, they don't understand. And
Like
that's a really narrow-minded thing to say, oh, you disagree with me, so you just don't understand. But I think there are certain beliefs that people hold because they don't understand like the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot easier to get your hands on drugs than it is a giant ass AR. And then also, if I stood on top of the MGM Grand throwing heroin at people, like it's not going to have the same result as if I'm in there with a giant AR and a bump stock. I'm not going to kill 70 people throwing heroin or throwing a car off the roof of the MGM Grand as the shooter did in Vegas with his guns. Like these are not, you can't compare these things. And it's like criminals will get their hands on guns too. Well, okay, not if the government buys them back. If that results in a civil war, that's fine with me. Like, I don't care who's going to win, you or the government. Like, seriously, good luck with your AR going against the fighter jets.
Yeah, I think that yeah, definitely. The drug thing is like, I live in a country where we have fairly rigid gun control. It's not as rigid as you might think, because you can still get like hunting licenses and stuff like that. But like
Yeah,
beyond
yeah,
that, the criminals will always get guns.
yeah.
But
Well, I
look,
mean, my
we
gun
can,
was
I can.
handed down. My gun was handed down to me. I mean, would that happen in Germany? I mean, I don't have a
Like
license to carry. It's
not
my
for
uncle's.
not for me, because my grandparents both ended up in prisoner of as prisoners of war, so they did not have guns when they came back. But I know people who like, when their grandfather or great grandfather died, and they kind of cleaned out the attic, and suddenly they found all these weapons that were still lying around from like World War II. Because it's
I
like,
mean, you guys find unexploded bombs. I mean,
we have lots of those. Trust me, we have
no, my
lots of
friend
those.
had to get off the subway or whatever the hell you call it over there, the metro,
Mhm.
twice, and he was only there for like 2 weeks. They had to evacuate because they found 2 unexploded bombs in the same week.
Like, depending on where you live, there's places that get like bombed heavily because there's a lot of
Mhm.
industry around that, or like critical industry places like that. You'll find bombs, unexploded bombs, all the time. That's just
Yeah,
like where I grew up in Mannheim, which is close to Ludwigshafen, where the BASF, it's huge, one of the world's leading chemistry like chemical factories, like corporations, is
oh,
located.
yeah, and there's bombs everywhere.
They got obviously bombed heavily, like
Probably.
really seriously. And we there's like situations like you don't want to renovate your house because whenever someone tries to dig in the garden or something, it's like a 50-50 chance you'll either
Yeah,
find Roman ruins and then the archaeologists will dig up your garden and you will not have like a chance to build in the next 10 years, or you'll find a bomb and you'll be fucked. But it's
yeah.
very much that kind of place. These are things like I can get my hands on drugs right now very easily. It's like I know people. um if I want to get weed, I can just like call a friend. If I want to
I have
get,
drugs right here.
yeah,
I mean, they're prescribed to me,
yeah,
but yeah,
no, that's the things like I can get my hands on drugs right now, but like those won't make me commit like mass murder anytime
no,
soon.
exactly.
I think there's a way where you can have like both drugs and guns be illegal, and it will not lead to mass murder.
Probably not.
I just found it like interesting because like you talked about it, like being a teacher, a school teacher in a rough district of Dallas, and like the reality is so weird from like socialist Europe to to a free market Dallas. It's like
Yeah.
it feels like you're actually working in a war zone, which you're not, but it still feels incredibly weird.
Sometimes we are. I mean, right before Christmas, we had to go into lockdown like 8 minutes before Christmas break because there was
Mhm.
some kind of altercation in the neighborhood, and we were like having to funnel kids back in, and they didn't want to come
Wow.
back in because it was Christmas break, and we heard the gunshots, and we're like, we got to get you back in, and they're like, no, and they run off, like straight into the gunfire because they wanted to get home. Yeah, there's a lot of gun violence in our neighborhood. Gun.
Yeah.
There was this huge war. I love telling this story. Oh my god! My first year there was this huge war between the volleyball team and the dance team because
Hmm.
they were the cheerleaders. I think the cheerleaders and the dance team might have been on the same side,
Yeah.
but this huge war. They got their friends involved and stuff, and so a massive fight broke out in the cafeteria,
Yeah.
and we were even more understaffed back then than we are now. But huge fight broke out. Someone somehow got mace on campus, so people were getting maced. And I'm in there like pouring milk on students who had been maced. I'm like this, and I see a teacher and she's got her phone and she's running. She's like, "We got parents." So the parents made it into the school and started fighting with each other. And so one day, I think this might have been the same day, a kid brought a gun to school. It was confiscated, and then the security guard gave it back to him at the end of the day. Got fired. But it's like, where in your head, like, why would you give a teenager a gun that you confiscated and gave it back at the end of the day?
It's like that's like me being an absolute ignorant European. It's like, what's the legal age for you to actually be allowed to have a gun? Is it 18 or?
It depends on the gun in the state. So
Okay.
in Texas, it's 18. You can buy anything. So
Hmm.
like on your 18th birthday, you can like the Uvalde shooter. He went and bought an AR-15. Like I think either the day or the day after he turned 18, just a few
Yeah.
days, and then went and killed 19 kids at an
Yeah.
elementary school.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's either in Florida it's 21 because of the Parkland shooter. They got that changed, but in Texas it is 18. So
I still can't get over the fact that you have like driver's licenses at 16, guns at 18, and alcohol at 21.
yeah,
It's like I feel like people should get drunk before they start mass murdering people, just like as a
probably.
general like health idea.
I mean, yeah, probably. But yeah, and that's another problem is that all states have their different laws. So marijuana is illegal in every form in Texas.
Mhm.
It's legal in Colorado. It's legal in California. Some places it's legal uh, just medicinally. What Britain says right here, I heard you can carry swords in Texas. Yeah, it's called open carry. You can carry any weapon openly.
I think I'm not quite sure about swords in Germany. I think swords might not be covered because although we may have a rule that prevents you from carrying knives. over a certain length, and I guess you can define a sword as a knife with a length over, I don't know, 10 inches or whatever it is, that makes it illegal to that turns it into a weapon. I'm not quite sure about that one.
No, I mean, you can carry, it's just you can't carry things into a gun free zone. And a lot of
Hmm.
people want to do away with gun free zones. They say it's common sense. Do away with gun free zones. So if someone with a gun comes in, you can use your gun to kill them.
Yeah.
But Allen, I don't know if you know about the mall, the shooting in Allen, Texas. I live very close to there, and
Oh,
I've been to
shit.
that
Yeah.
mall a few times. Yeah, like 8 people were killed. But if you watch the body cam footage, um, from the time we hear shots to the time the cop radios saying he killed the shooter, it's less than 4 minutes, and 8 people still died.
Yeah, because guns are fast, and automated gun like ARs are incredibly fast.
Yeah, it's like, oh, let's just have guns there. I'm like, well, the dude did have a gun. It wasn't enough.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just interest. Like it's frustrating and sad to see from the outside, and I think, and that's kind of why I wanted to go there and talk about it, because like I think there's sort of like this weird sort of inability for non-US people, or at least like European people,
Mhm.
to understand the difference in gun culture. We were like, yeah, why does this happen? It's like, there's a lot of history behind it, but
Because it's
it's sort of
fun.
like,
I mean, it is fun to go out and shoot, like what we call skeet shooting,
uh,
where, I mean, do you know what that is?
I don't know, but you can totally
Like,
explain it to
you
me.
have a little machine and it'll throw clay pigeons,
Oh,
and
yeah, clay pit.
you get
Okay.
there and you shoot the pigeon. Like, it's fun. Target shooting is fun. And the first time I ever held a gun, I think I was 13. Um, like, it's fun. And hunting, like, I've never been hunting, but like I'm not opposed to it because I eat meat. So if someone was like, if I was put in that situation to shoot an
Yeah.
animal and then eat it, I would do it. Like, but
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
totally willing to give up that hobby. Totally. Like, it's
Yeah.
just a lot of people aren't.
Yeah. It's just like interesting, sort of like how there's like these weird divides. It's like where like in Europe, like most parts of Europe, like the further east you go, the more weird rules get. Like the level of no gun control that you have in the US and the results are just like so insane for some of us. We're like, we sit back and it's like, how can you not see that this is a problem? Or I mean,
Because
obviously see that this is a problem and not do anything.
they think people are the problem. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, no, people shoot people. Guns and bullets kill them.
Yeah.
Like,
If you give all of these people swords, it will make things slower and
a
harder.
little bit. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway, to bring things back to like just writing and stuff like that. So you're writing mostly nonfiction. You're in literary magazines, like, and I think that's like a different, another interesting thing, because like short stories are sort of like a science fiction thing and have been for a long time, but they've sort of fallen to the back burner. And there's still people writing, short stories, and they end up in the two or three still existing short story magazines in the big magazines in science fiction. But like the short story as a literary fiction thing is still huge compared to
It is, but
nonfiction.
it's through the magazine circuit,
Yeah, and
literary
I think
magazines, lit journals. But a lot of times, people like really serious literary authors will get their stuff put in to like literary magazines, and then once they get a few published through there, they'll like approach an agent or something and get a collection put together. A lot of people, like George Saunders is a good example. He had a ton of short story collections where he finally had his first novel, which was weird as hell. It's called Lincoln
yeah,
and the Bardo. But yeah, so if you're trying to make it in the literary fiction world, um, lit mags are the best way to go. Get your foot in the door. and they love discovering people. Like that's their thing. Like,
And I think that's interesting though, because it's very different from like the fantasy and romance and so forth genres. And
yeah,
I know you'll have like a discussion with Joe Byrne on his channel.
you're gone. We lost you again, Rafe. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Hooray! Fuck that, man. That's what you get for like having a good microphone. It does. Anyway, so my question was more about the difference of approach when it comes to writing, because I feel like there's a different sort of expectation between writing literary fiction, people trying to write literary fiction, memoir, or whatever, compared to people who are writing fantasy or science fiction or genre fiction in a lot of ways, especially when it kind of moves over to the sort of to the more self-published part of the sphere, right? Where in literary fiction you don't do self-publish; it just won't work.
Most
If you
people,
do, if you do monster erotica, self-publish is definitely the way to go, and more power to those people. Like
exactly.
I'm a huge fan of Chuck Tingle. He's
Yeah,
awesome.
I like. I mean, okay, well, maybe Ice Planet Barbarians is not the best example because that's been picked up, but
Yeah.
I love Ice Planet Barbarians. It's hilarious. And Kissing the Coronavirus, that's a personal fave. Seduced by the Pumpkin Spice Latte, that one I like a lot.
I love like a lot of like
Yeah,
more
Chuck
like
Tingle is self-published again.
mounted by the Minotaur and pumped by the pumpkin patch were like really good.
Like, but the thing about the Pumpkin Spice Latte one is that there really does, at least in the U.S., seem to be kind of a cult around
Yeah.
the Pumpkin Spice Latte. And then in this story, it's this woman goes into Starbucks and is like pouring it on her and masturbating. And then the two baristas come in and they're like, "We knew you were like us," and then they just have an orgy. I wouldn't be surprised if there are really people out there who do that.
Here's the thing. Here's the dirty secret about like pumpkin spice. I never knew what pumpkin spice was, because that kind of like sort of spice is something we have that in Europe all over the year. We have that all the time. We don't have to
I
wait to fucking
don't
October.
even know if I've ever had one, but I dressed up my guinea pig as a pumpkin spice latte for Halloween.
That's something we need to get to at some point.
My
The
guinea
guinea
pigs.
pigs.
Okay.
Yes. But like I was more like wondering like as I said, like I think there are situations where self-publishing is a valid and important way to do stuff. And it may be in like, stuff like, you know, dinosaur erotica, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
go for it. It's awesome. And I'm just like wondering like how much that is sort of like a sign of like a different approach to how we both
I,
as readers and writers deal with literature, because I think it's also like on the reader's side a different approach, right?
I mean, you're obviously, if you're writing pumpkin spice erotica, you're not going to be writing for the same reason someone who writes, Shuggy Bane is. Like, let's face it, you're not. But I see people who maybe have the potential to be talented, especially in the fantasy community, gravitating towards self-publishing because they've heard some misinformation about traditional publishing. They don't want to wait. They think that Ryan Cahill is successful, which I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's a very good writer on a sentence level, but he's sold a lot of books and they think they can do that. Or they just think they're better than they are. They like the idea of freedom. And agents and publishers, unless you're like go TikTok viral and they want to make money off you, are not going to pick you up if you've self-published.
Okay, a quick interruption, Jin. Chuck Tingle is partly self-published. His monthly Tinglers are published through Patreon, but his novel last year, Camp Damascus, and his new novel, Murder Your Gaze, Bury Your Gaze. That's the one. Bury Your Gaze are both mainstream published by, I think, Random House, but I might be getting it wrong. But most of his short stories were self-published until he became so big that Random House decided that it's actually a good idea to actually, give that guy some money.
Yeah, same thing happened with Ice Planet Barbarians.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of like the
But notice that it's the absurdity of that that
yeah,
gets picked up because they realize people like it.
mhm,
Legend and Lattes is another one that got picked
yeah,
up because it just
yeah,
exploded. But I mean, you look at someone like Ryan Cahill, he hasn't been picked up, and he's not going to be.
yeah.
Or
And
Will White, I guess. I don't know if he's been picked up. I like, I have trouble with sci-fi. Um, but I
he's the cradle
know
guy that everyone
the
talks about,
Cradle
right?
guy, I know that they wanted to pick his stuff up, but he wanted to serialize it and they didn't. So he said F you and did it himself.
Which
So,
is fine if you're at that point and you're making money as a self-published
yeah.
author on that level. It's like, yeah, you can say fuck you to a publisher because at that point it doesn't mean that much. I think at that point it's more like for having the bragging rights of being mainstream published or whatever, and having the bragging rights of like I said no to a mainstream publisher is probably worth more when it comes to bragging rights. But yeah, I think there is that idea that sometimes if a self-published thing becomes successful enough, you get a deal.
That's
But I
becoming
think
more
that's
and
that's
more
not that's
rare.
not, that's not something you should pin your hopes on, right?
No, it's not going to happen. Um,
I think
and
it's fine to first query, and if no one wants your novel, you can still self-publish afterwards if you feel like it. That's
querying takes years. That's what people don't get. Like,
yeah.
yeah, you've got to wait like 8 weeks sometimes just for a rejection letter. And you get 2 or 3 rejection letters. They're like, fuck, I had to wait so long. And then they just go self publish instead of maybe looking at, um, like,
Hmm.
lost my train of thought. But instead of maybe looking at their query letter, is there something wrong with their query letter? Is there something wrong with your first 10 pages? Instead of like taking that moment, they think they're ready and they say, oh, these publishers are shit. Fuck that. I'll go self publish. And they end up destroying their chances. Of course, you could also end up like Philip Chase with a crappy agent who can't sell their stuff. So but I don't think that happens very often.
I have no idea what happened there. I don't know. I haven't read the books. I will not comment on what happens with Philip Chase or his
He's
or
a
his
good
agent.
writer. He's a good writer. I just know his agent couldn't sell it, and I think he was on sub for like something ridiculous, like 10 years. So his agent just couldn't sell it, and I see why. But yeah. So if I had been Philip, I probably just would have written something else. But I can't speak for the guy. He's got a PhD, so I'm not going to speak for him. I'm just a lowly little master's degree person right here.
Yeah, yeah. So I have no insight into that, so I can't comment on that. I think like one of those questions that people often don't ask, like, why do you write stories? Is your goal to sell to your to one of the big five and sell your stuff, be a big author, make money as a writer? Or is your goal to just like finish a novel, which is hard enough, I guess.
Yeah,
It's like I haven't done it.
it wasn't that hard, to be honest. But
I think it. To be honest, look, you've done it. For a lot of people, writing 100,000
oh
words
yeah,
to,
no,
to the
definitely.
end is that shit is hard.
Yeah. A lot of people are scared of writing. Like I suck at math. A lot of my students, so I'm pretty compassionate towards my students who suck at writing because it's scary. Like just that blank page staring at you, trying to get your ideas out is intense. But
I think like for
the
me that
feeling they get when they're writing, I think, is similar to the feeling I get when I do math, which is just defeat and sadness
mm,
and hopelessness. So I try to encourage them just write. Doesn't matter if it sounds like crap. Go back. You can't
yeah,
improve what isn't there. Daniel Clauser, I agree with you about Cahill. I don't think his readers would notice.
I think I think like part of the interesting thing for me when I try to write sentences like I have stuff and it's in my head, and I'm like, this sounds really good. And I write it down, and it doesn't sound good. And
So
then I
you
have to go
write
back
it.
and then I have to writing something down, even if it's on like in a text file on a computer where you can change everything all
Yeah.
the time. It lends the whole thing an air of being definite, and making definite choices is hard. Going like, this is it. I'll use this word right now, and you write it down.
See, I
It
feel the
feels
exact
like making a
opposite,
choice.
Rafe.
No,
that's
but no,
that's really funny. Is I feel the exact opposite when I put the word down
mhm.
in the first draft or whatever. I know it's going to change, so it doesn't feel definite to me at all. It feels more like a starting point. And I actually love rewriting. I know I am like big outlier in that, but editing and rewriting is my favorite part. It's getting it
I hate
down. That's the hardest
I,
part.
you know how like people hate listening to their own voice, which makes editing videos and stuff like really hard.
Yeah.
I have the same thing with reading stuff that I've written. It's
Do you not like your own story? Like,
none of that. I hate having it. Now, part of that may be that because I'm blind, I have to use like a screen reader, and it reads stuff like in like
yeah,
to me. I don't know that, but like having to go through the stuff through the words I put down
yeah.
is incredibly painful. It makes editing so hard.
Interesting. Yeah, I know I'm one of the few people who actually really enjoys it. So I try to get something down on the page and then go back and fix it later because I like building on what I already have there. So, but if I have nothing there, I can't build on
Yeah.
it and make it more than what it already is.
Yeah. Yep. But I think there is that, like, as long as the words are in our heads, they're super fluid and we can do stuff with them. And even if we know we can change them, we're still casting them into some form. And I think there is something to that in like a more like hard to define ways. Like we're making choices. As soon as you write stuff, you're making a choice that you didn't make while it was still just something you played around with in your head. And for some of us, making choices is just fucking hard.
Yeah.
Even though we know we can actually, reverse the choices later on.
Yeah.
The act of making
Maybe that's why
choices.
I like it because I have problems making choices in real life, and everything we do in real life we can't take back. We
Yeah.
can in writing. If it sucks, we can go back and change our shitty decision that we initially made. We can't do that in real life.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's sort of like the thing we need to understand as writers. Like, yeah, we can actually do that. We can edit.
We can.
It's a power we don't have in real life.
No.
All right. We've been doing this for like almost 2 hours now.
We have.
The question is like, how fit are you? How long do you want to keep on going, Amanda? Because you're sick.
I am sick, and I was actually starting to wonder the same thing. I'm not sure how much longer I can last, to be
Yeah,
honest.
because I don't want to tax your health.
Yeah. So I would be cool to jump off, to be honest. But I'd love to do this again, maybe when I'm not sick.
Yeah. Hey, like seriously, I had a lot of fun. Of like people have
Yeah,
like
me too.
questions for Amanda before we leave. Just like hammer them out right
Do
now, and
it,
then
do it,
we'll
do
just
it.
like go through that stuff, and then we'll be done by 11, and I can do whatever I do
This
after
was
11.
fun. Yeah, I was hoping to film my um, review of Cahill's of Blood and Fire in the fall today, but I'm gonna have to rest my voice for a little bit.
That's the. Oh yeah, but while we're waiting for questions and stuff, like, what drew you to guinea pigs? I mean, you're like a BookTube's #1 guinea pig person. Why guinea
Um,
pigs?
um, I initially wanted, well, I mean, I had them when I was younger,
Yeah,
and I wanted a rabbit. Well,
yeah.
turns out I'm very allergic to rabbits.
Ah,
And I got my first guinea pig as an adult when I was during the pandemic with my
mhm.
parents, and I wanted a cat, or I've always wanted a cat. My dad's allergic, can't have them.
Mm.
Had him when I was younger, and my dad was always sick, and they couldn't figure out why until they realized it was their beloved
Yeah.
cats that were literally killing him. So, oh, my friend had to hold on. Give me 1 second. His cat is. She whacked hard off a wall.
Oh.
Yeah, yikes. Okay, I hope his cat is okay. Anyway, so I wanted a cat. I still want a cat, but couldn't get one. So I was like, okay, if I can't have a cat, then I want a bunny. No, I
Yeah.
am so allergic to them. So I was like, you know what? I had guinea pigs when I was younger. I'm just gonna get guinea pigs, and I did, and I am so happy I got them because while they are little tiny potatoes with legs, they really can, like, they respond to you and they know your name.
Mm-hmm.
Mine run up to the edge of the cage and start screaming when I get home, and
That's
they're
cool.
very much creatures of habit. So when I wake up in the morning, they know they're about to get fed. They run over to their food bowl, and they, like, when they get excited, they kind of jump around. Like, it messes with their better than they kind of jump around. It's called popcorning because they look kind of like popcorn. I would want a capybara. Well, guinea pigs are basically capybaras. They're just like mini capybaras, but they kind of jump around and go a little crazy when they're excited. It's called popcorning, and they like to run around really, really fast when they get excited. So they're just awesome creatures, and you really can bond with them. Although you would think you wouldn't because they're rodents, but you really can.
That's cool.
Yeah.
See, for me, it was like the opposite. Like we had bunnies, and then we had a cat, and then we had to get rid of the bunnies because obviously cats and bunnies are not exactly best friends.
I still want a cat, but I'm worried they'd kill my guinea pigs.
Yeah, that might be happening. It's like, like, and then I graduated to a dog, and I think I'm more like a dog person because dogs are cool. Because dogs are lazy. And if you're a lazy person like me, dogs are really cool. You can hang out, and you
Guinea
can
pigs are
like
great
bond
ways
over
too.
finding like a place that sells sausages to you, which is
Yeah,
everywhere in Germany. So dogs are happy in Germany, and you can just like
I
hang
don't.
out and just like
Yeah,
biggest,
but I've never
fucking
petted a
biggest fan.
capybara. But ugh, yeah, guinea pigs are very friendly creatures too. They really are, and my students love them. So
Oh,
maybe
so you bring them to school?
oh yeah, I take them to school all the time. Yeah,
Oh, cool. That's
students
awesome.
love them. It's goes a long way with these kids who all suffer from trauma because of where they live, and having the guinea pigs in there goes a long way to just earn their trust. Weirdly, you wouldn't, like, it sounds kind of weird, but having the guinea pigs in there,
Yeah.
yeah, like I bring my guinea pigs in, and all of a sudden they trust me for some reason when they wouldn't
I think
trust
that,
anybody.
I mean, that might be just like one of the things that we kind of didn't talk about when we talk about your school stuff, and you will be coming back, and then we'll talk about that more. But it's like
Yeah, we did not talk
you being at a school in like central Dallas is very much
Southeast Dallas.
southeast Dallas. You're not having like um, white privilege kids,
No,
I guess.
no, 80% are Hispanic, 20% are Black. There's no privilege at all. No, they
Yeah,
they
I
are.
think that's interesting that you know that the guinea pigs can help with that
Yeah,
the
they
trauma.
can. Yeah. Right. So no questions. Looks like.
Um, ignore biggest bad joke about MTG because that was um funny.
MTG, what, Magic the Gathering?
None of that. So, like early today, I said like, "Hey, come join the stream. I'll have Amanda on. It's going to be fun. We might have some spicy opinions and stuff." And it's like, "Oh, you're going to talk about you. You'll have I didn't actually say your name. It's like, "Oh, you're going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene on." I was like,
Oh, Marjorie Taylor
like that
Greene.
is just.
I thought that was Magic the Gathering. It was better than.
We made that joke early on as well, so because
Oh,
like I didn't know she was. I didn't know she was a science fiction and fantasy fan. It's like, well, she's named MTG. What you think?
yeah. It's true. Yeah.
Like she's very
The,
much into science fiction.
the
She
quote
believes into
reality
space
she
race.
lives in is pretty much a fantasy too. So
Yeah.
there's that. Yeah.
No, seriously, thank you for coming on
So,
despite
yeah.
being sick and everything. It was
Oh
great.
yeah, it
I,
was
I
fun. I'm gonna rest my voice and then I'll make a video hopefully later. But this was a lot of fun and it took my mind off
drink
being sick.
drink some herbal tea. It helps.
I don't like tea, but I'll
You
find
can
something.
you can you can
I'll find
call it
something.
a
What?
be fantasy about it. Call it a herbal infusion.
Whatever. An herbal infusion. I think I'm gonna take a Dayquil instead. So we'll do
That
that.
might
It's
also
still
work.
daytime for me. So
All right, like thanks everyone for showing up. It was great fun, and maybe I'll actually get that video out that I've been working on for like 2 weeks tomorrow. I've done recordings. They exist. They suck, but maybe I'll be able
nice.
to do another one tomorrow.
I'm gonna hit leave studio and go get a Dayquil. See you guys.
See you around. All right. Did this work? I doubt it. I didn't. Sorry.